I've been returning to Poland every 1 or 2 years on average, and I made 5 films about the development of Poland from socialism to capitalism, and I recorded this already. The films were shown on American television. So, but I'm discovering something every time. But this trip is really more a trip to the youth, to be young, and to the documentary ideas that I believed in some 40 years ago, which I believe to these days. And my confrontation with the films that we were evaluating is that that my philosophy of documentary has been finally followed to a great extent, and it gives me a lot of satisfaction. Although you should know that in 1964 we used short format. We didn't ask questions. We didn't go after the people because we were kind of stealing life from the reality, which sometimes was uncensored and provocative. Because the government wanted us to show a completely different life. They wanted us to show happy people, well-dressed, content, and the truth was opposite. But my confrontation that I filmed in '63 between these American imperialist Poles who are returning to the socialist country full of fear was a provocation, but for some reason was not really considered anti-government, because the government wanted to show that we are open to Americans if they love Poland. You see, the Polish patriotism is always being played by every system in Poland, whether it's, and we know now that a patriotic card is always helping any government. And even the communist government was playing this card. So if people were crying in the film after the words that I'm coming to Poland as an old elephant and I'm going to stay here and lay like the elephant does when he's old, then everybody loves it. People on the street, in the cinema, cried because they say, well, we have a shitty life here in this country, but there must be something about Poland if this guy who comes from the rich country, US, is so emotional about being in Poland. So they gave people some hope. And so the censorship didn't bother censorship, because they wanted people to be content about Poland, whatever Poland was. But today, the filmmakers exploring other taboos same way in a longer form. And as I said on the stage, the huge difference is that the development of media and television over these 40 years, which made people much more open to be on the camera. Generally, Poles are very bad on camera. It's a Catholic country, and people supposed to be modest. So it's not in good taste to exhibit yourself, and so for a long time, I mean, people were afraid of censorship in the beginning. But even if the country was free, somehow they were uneasy with the camera. I remember the same time when was the change of the Polish system, I observed Russian television, and the Russians were much more spontaneous and open toward the camera. But meanwhile, there was a reality television. I think the phenomenon for the Polish psyche is Big Brother, because Poles saw on the screen that a Polish person can be exhibitionist and even sometimes show the organs that you're supposed not to show, or imply that. And so it was a signal to everybody that now it's a time for everybody to be free to expose themselves to the camera. That does not automatically create a lot of good documentaries. To the contrary, they create a lot of bad documentaries. But the value of it is that people are freer, The equipment is different, like this camera that he's filming me, when you can go to any light and do it in an instant time and at the small cost. So in both sides there are changes. But then, of course, what is old-fashioned really is that what filmmakers mental work that is done to do it. This mental work, unfortunately, it's not getting easier with all the technology. It's always to have a great idea. It's a big achievement, and we don't have always great ideas. Usually, we have so-so. But when this technology and this facility of people easiness in the front of the camera comes together with a good idea, then we have films like in this competition that I was in the jury. We are head-on the feature film now, because we're no longer in documentary limited into a commentary or into a education or historical analysis. I mean, people still doing those type of documentary, but we are capable of actually register a human drama or comedy sometimes, when until now only feature film was able to do by writing. But I never made a feature film, I never will, because I think that it's actually physically and mentally impossible to make a good feature film. And the fact that we do have from time to time good films is by accident. That, you know, there's a bad script, as it usually is, and somewhat a director makes a film against this script, and their actors, they're horrible, and somewhat there's a chemistry that is being created and the actors are good. So when the feature film is successful, I call it a documentary. We all striving for the kind of truth and something that it's moving and powerful and informative at the same time. And one way is to write 120 pages, pretending that it's life. And when somebody says it's a good script and here's the money, then nobody think about it. Then you shoot it and then you put it on editing, and that has nothing to do with life. And then, you know, you have to engineer it, what I call it. You have to fix it. But the beauty of documentaries is that it's an open process every minute. You can shoot and you can come back. And the documentary has this inbuilt value of originality, because you cannot repeat any human being as a cliche. In feature film, you do just that. You just make a film, perhaps out of the real life stories, but also out of other films. And then you think that through manipulating images, you can get results. But the viewer today is much more sophisticated than the viewer in the last period of time. So the big super production of American Hollywood will still be watched, but it's a basically kids exploitation and some adults that have kids kind mind. But the so-called psychological dramas or even comedies are more and more ridiculous when you look at them, by definition, even if they're successful. Because documentary filmmakers are able, at the fraction of the cost, get much deeper into all the human trappings or situation or drama or conflict. And of course it still needs a talent and a good circumstances. It's a lot of things are based on pure accident. That's what documentary is about, that you cannot create a perfect crime in documentary. You cannot sit down and say, that's the film that I would like to make, and that's the film that was going to be good. This is why I cannot write more than half page about my documentary. This is why I have such a difficulties to get grants, because I can only start filming, but I cannot write, because to me it's a lie. If I pretend that I predict what's going to happen in the front of my camera, what people will, it's a pure lie. And in order to get money, I have to lie, by promising something that the people that have money are interested in. So I'm lying about different aspects of it, and I justify, and then I get money. I'm too sensitive about the real sense of filmmaking to be able to lie. It just disgusts me. So, or I don't know how. You have to have. Maybe I would lie if I know how, but when I start to write those things that I cannot prove, I dislike it already. And perhaps people that read my proposals feel that I do not fulfill their expectation, which has nothing to do with filmmaking. So a good documentary is about something that you don't know, and you make documentaries not because you know, but because you don't know, and you only know when you did it. And it's either a defeat or a victory. As I used to say, film is a documentary, every film is a crime and a punishment. A filmmaker commits crime, and the audience has a right to punish him or her. And sometimes you can go away from the murder. Sometimes you can be innocent, and they don't punish you; they applaud you.